In a world that is so filled with what many people interpret as friendships found on social media, we also see a world that is starving for true relationships. So we have to be very cautious not to depend upon social media to be our friends. And for people with autism, the other thing to think about is that their friends should not just be people that get paid to hang out with them, such as a teacher's aide or a teacher or a personal care assistant, but to have meaningful relationships with the people that they choose to have relationships with. Thank you guys for joining me today. This is such an important topic because, our sense of belonging is really a core to being a human. And so many people, both people with autism and without, spend a lot of time trying to fit in. And fitting in means that you are changing yourself to fit in with the expectations that somebody else might have for you. And it does not increase the sense of belonging. And so we want everyone just to think really carefully about that when you guys who are parents and teachers, when you think about the kids that you're helping to grow into, big humans from being little humans. And just be thinking about that because we get so much benefit around our relationships and our friendships and the people in our life. So for one, of course, we get those, right? We get a friend that we can bounce things off of and do things with, but also 65+% of all of us, at least in the US, we get our jobs as adults based upon somebody that we know. So it might be the person that we know, or Joe knows Karen who owns this business or that business, or this person's looking. So we have so much benefit from the relationships that we have. So imagine being a person who doesn't have any. And that stuff starts when you're children. And so we just want everybody to think really carefully about how important those relationships are and how to help kids when they're little. The skills that we know as adults, they started when we were younger and we got older, and we kind of spent our entire childhood learning how to engage with other people. It's not something that just pops in there. You learn it over years of practicing. But if you are a child who is separated in your school to an autism classroom and you don't have experience trying to interact with kids who are not in that program, so in an inclusive situation, how do we expect them to be able to gain the skills to then work side by side people who don't have a disability when they're adults? It really doesn't make much sense. And so these things are really important thinking forward. And unfortunately, you have to think forward. So when your kid is 5, you already have to be thinking, what are the skills that they're going to need when they grow up and they're out there in the workplace or in college or whatever, trying to just maintain a life for themselves. So one of the best support strategy kind of things that I think is just really good are social stories. And so parents, I encourage you to work with your teachers, and any autism coach or specialist or speech language pathologists are usually great at this too, on developing social stories. There is actually several books by Carol Gray on social stories and writing social stories. So you guys can just Google her. It's Gray, and you can find all kinds of information about social stories. But I just have found that they're highly beneficial. And, if they're done right, they include this person. So if the person is Bob, the social story is going to be about Bob and Bob forming relationships with his peers, maybe in his classroom, with the other people around him that, we want him to forge these relationships with. So you want to look at that, and really you can kind of develop those around all sorts of different types of activities. I know when my son was young, we did some on him going out onto the field, the recess time at school, and playing soccer with the group of kids, because that's what they were doing. So the kids would all run around with the ball, and he didn't know anything about doing that. And nobody had ever come over to him and tried to pull him in. So we wanted to, figure out, okay, so how can we teach this skill? And how could we engage with the other kids in teaching him? And it was just like a beautiful, beautiful moment. And we actually took that from a social story into something called video modeling. And all the kids became actors in this little film. And it was so beneficial. And he thought it was pretty darn cool to be able to see himself on a video, engaging in activity with his peers and kicking the ball down the field. So I thought it was pretty neat and it was highly effective. You want to create opportunities for your child to meet others. And that when they're young, that means that mom and dad are oftentimes scheduling, play dates with other kids. And then as they grow, middle school, high school, they have clubs. And so encouraging them to join clubs. And I know there's karate, there's tap, there's ballet, there's gymnastics, there's all different kinds of sports. There's scouting, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. There's so many different opportunities out there. Don't be afraid to get your child engaged in those. And yes, for a lot of parents, you need to be part of it. So not every parent can just say, okay, so go on. I'll see you in an hour when you're done. So you kind of have to strategize and plan that you may need to be there. You may need to be in there on the mat, when they're doing karate, at least until they kind of learn, all right, how does everything work here? How does this flow? But I find that so many adults on the spectrum share with me that they spent years as children in therapy, but their passion might have been drawing, but they never had an art class. Or they love listening to acoustic guitar, but they never had a lesson. And so be mindful as parents about how to engage your kids in the world, not just therapy sessions and things that are important, but at the same time, I never heard someone say, I'm so glad I spent all that time, in speech therapy or whatever type of therapy, versus I'm so glad that I spent time those years spent learning how to play the guitar or, doing that gymnastics class. And because the more of those type of skills that we have, the more we just, of course, yes, the relationships that we build, but also we just become a more well-rounded individual. We have experiences to kind of retrieve when we're reading, right? So that's another thing that these type of activities really benefit is if you are reading a story and you're already struggling with comprehension, but if you have no prior knowledge of that, whatever that is, so let's say it's a story about going to a farm. If you've never been to a farm, how are you going to be able to conceptualize in your head, what does this FARM mean? What is that? And so the more experiences that we have, the more we can kind of pull upon those things to kind of move us forward. Okay. So you want to be mindful of that. One of the things that I did when my kids were little, I was the person who had like the cookies and the ice pops and the really cool swing set in the backyard, because I wanted the kids from the neighborhood to be like, oh, that's like the fun house over there. And, they'd be willing to come over. And I have two boys, and they were always actually very involved with Scouts. So it was not uncommon for me to have a bunch of kids running around my house. And then as they grew older, my older son was very interested in, he's a musician. And so then I had musicians in my house. And it is really cool when you have a house of young people that just want to hang out. And, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. I encourage you guys to kind of think about that. And sometimes that does take work. Focus on the quality of your kids' relationships. So you want to make sure that their only relationships are not like, again, if your child is in an autism classroom, I'm assuming that that all of the kids in that classroom have autism. And that means that all the kids in that classroom struggle with forming relationships, that maybe communication is really hard for them, that they may be very, not happy about being in school. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be happening in that classroom. And it takes a lot of work on the part of a teacher in an ASD classroom to work on social skills when all of the kids are struggling in that area. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely learn by role models. And I look to other people. I mean, how many people do you follow on social media because you think, okay, I want to learn something from this person because they know things that I do not? We all do that. So you want to make sure that you expose your child when they're younger, all the way up into adulthood. And then eventually, hopefully, they want to join things that will help them grow and, become a happy adult with relationships that they choose. So you want to kind of get them plugged in the right spaces. And you want to educate your kid on the meaning of friendships, because I have met a lot of people who say that everybody is their friend. And, we have friends and we have acquaintances. We have people that we're going to tell our secrets to, and we're going to say certain things to. And then there's other people that we're not. And so there's a lot of filtration that happens in our communication. And if you are not taught that some people are going to be in your inside circle, and then there's like layers, right? So the inside circle may be those that, it's okay to hug, that you have those personal relationships with. So that might be mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, that kind of stuff. They go in that circle. And then the next circle, those are your close friends. So those are your friends that you go to their birthday parties, that maybe mom and dad have a relationship with their parents, those people that are in a really special space as friendships. And then maybe the next one, those are acquaintances. So those might be kids in your classroom, but they're not really kids that you want to hang out with, or you have an interest, a similar interest in. And those are not the kids that you're going to tell personal things to. And then beyond that, we get into people like that are at school, not in your class, and in your community, on your block, and that kind of stuff. So they can go out, but a lot of people need to be educated on who makes a friend. Like, what type of person makes the friend? Because we definitely hear, like a lot from a lot of teachers report that kids will say what they say. They say kids will say the darndest things, and for a lot of the kids that I'm talking about right now, oh yeah, they say all kinds of stuff. So if you think that your child's going to school and not divulging family secrets, you're probably fooling yourself, because that stuff has to be taught. So just be mindful of that. So for just a minute, I want to speak kind of like to teachers. And, teachers got to educate yourself. And I know it's really hard. Back when I started working in this area, there was more money, more time for teachers to go to different types of trainings. And it was, I don't know, it was just like sort of a world on fire. Everybody wanted to learn. Everybody was able to access really good trainers. And I have just kind of seen a decline on that. I think a lot of people are depending upon like podcast or online training, and it's just different. It just is. When you are in the same space as your peers, you're going to learn so much more. So if you get the opportunity to go to a training where you can be in physical space with other people that are working in the same field, go, please. It's going to be so beneficial to you, because you're going to form relationships, and you're also going to learn a whole lot of stuff. So I encourage you to kind of reach out, let your boss, so that's typically your principal, let them know the value of being able to go to a training, and how you will become a better teacher and a better support system for all of your students, and ultimately for the whole school. It's better the whole school if you have more knowledge about some of this stuff. So when it comes to social skills, the typical stuff, right? You could use the social stories, you can use the video modeling, which I mentioned. You can use all those types of visual support systems within your class. You could teach them all this kind of stuff. But I encourage you to look at your day and see, like, how can we plug kids into social groups? So that might be like what some teachers call a lunch bunch. So maybe during lunch, and it's really best when it is adult directed, at least on the initial side of it, because maybe the kids don't know what they're expected to do and how to engage with others. So it may require, I know it's lunchtime for you, so maybe if there's a teacher's aide that would normally be walking around the cafeteria, maybe that person could come and just sit with this group of kids and really encourage it. Include typical kids in that. Because again, Typical kids are going to talk faster. They're going to talk about topics that are hot topics, like the things that are current today. And some kids on the spectrum, they like old stuff. They like things that like somebody my age might even be interested in. And so making sure that you're kind of up to speed on what kids like to talk about and helping them sort of just not fit in, but have a sense of belonging because they can participate in the conversation. If you've got a kid who's using alternative communication, so let's say that they use the device to communicate, having that stuff set up in advance, and so you're ready to rock and roll. Do not leave the communication device in the classroom during lunch. Making sure that that goes with them so they can use it in lunch, at recess, all those times walking in the hall, even where they can comment about walking in the hall and getting in line with their peers and all that kind of stuff. So setting up those social groups are just highly beneficial. Encouraging group activities. So I love when a general education class and any type of special education class merge together and they do co-teaching. Ideally, in my head, it's all day, every day, but I get it. Not everybody thinks like I do, but maybe having a carved out time of the day where the two classes are joining together. Some schools have literally have a door between classrooms. So if you're lucky enough to have that where the two classes can come together and you guys could play game, and I get it, everything has to be academic, I know, but there are still fun games that have to do with reading, writing, and math, science, and social studies. That does happen. So, having those type of group activities would be really, really good. And again, you kind of have to prime sometimes those kids who may have some challenges with that situation, that it's coming. This is what's going to happen. We're going to be all excited because we're going to get to see our friends and talk about it and help them engage in it. Same thing with, high school. Being able to have the kids experience those after school clubs. Clubs are a great space because there's none of those academic demands that we find during the day, school day. And, it's a really good opportunity to be able to mix with others, and they get to choose their area of interest, right? So if you've got a kid who likes the arts, maybe a drama club would be a really good one. And frankly, drama kids, I think, are really fabulous because it's just like that club attracts kids who are diverse and they just do a really good job integrating with others and just they like differences. They like to experience differences in other people, and they're just overall a pretty welcoming, and they just wrap their arms around you kind of group of kids. So I'm very partial to drama kids, and creating a buddy system. Okay, so for some kids, it's like a peer buddy program, and so that does take a little thinking, right? But you also don't want to force kids on other kids. So, for instance, if Joe has autism and Joe doesn't want to play with Susie, doesn't really care for Susie, then Susie's probably not going to be a good buddy for Joe. So the children should have some say-so in this, or else it's just don't even bother, because I wouldn't want anybody telling me who my friends are going to be. And yes, I understand that we want kids to learn how to share and turn take and engage and all that stuff. But if we're talking about creating relationships, the kid needs to have some autonomy on who they choose to be their friends. And the other thing I want to say about a buddy system is I don't want anyone to think that 30 minutes of being with a buddy per week is going to be enough time to forge relationships. It might be a hey, how are you kind of thing, but that's not. And the reason I bring that up is because some people, when I ask about the inclusion that they're doing in their school, they'll say, oh, we're running this buddy program. And then when I say, oh, okay, that's awesome. How much time? Oh, 30 minutes a week on a Friday, from 1:30 to 2, when the kids are done. They're done. They want to go home. That is not a good time. So you want to make sure that if you have a buddy system, it is consistent, that it is inclusive, right? So that's out there in the school, that relationships are being formed, right? So they have like the Best Buddies program at the older levels, like the high school. And the one of the things that program strives to do is, that's not a kid hanging out with a kid in school. That is relationships that are going beyond the schoolyard, that are going out into the community. They're going to the movies together. They're going to a high school football game together. And, I've seen many of those relationships go well beyond the end of high school. And that's what you want. You want the people to become friends, so that when high school is done and there's no more club, that relationship still persists. Okay. All right. I think I'm done with my tangent for today. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. I hope that you got a little benefit out of this. And I hope that you will share it with others that you know. We are trying to really get more supports out to our community. And, I just think that the more knowledge that we have, the wiser we become, and the more that we can kind of help. Like I said before, if you're a parent or if you're a teacher, I hope that you kind of are thoughtful in your process of, how can I help make my child's life better, my student's life better? If you are a person with autism, some of, like my son is constantly trying to think, okay, so what can I do? What is the next thing I can do? What kind of club can I join? What type of, meetup? For those of you guys who are adults, meetup is really great. And there's a meetup group for everybody. You want to do basket weaving? There is a meetup group for that. And it's really nice to be able to join a group that has similar interests that you do. So if you haven't checked that out, you can download the app. It's literally called Meetup, MEETUP, and you guys can check that out. Okay. All right. Well, I will see you again next time, and everybody take care.